and Roland's mother begins to wonder if her sister's spirit has joined the voices from the beyond.
Aunt Tilly, if that's you, knock 3 times.
Or perhaps it's something worse.
Aunt Tilly, stop!
We begin on June 8th, 1924, here at almost the highest point on Earth. This is Everest, in the heart of the Himalayas. And these two men are striving to become the first people to ever reach the summit, British mountaineers George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. But just hours from now, they will both vanish. 3 decades later, Everest will finally be officially conquered by another duo, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. But is it possible that the history books will get it wrong? Could these two men, Mallory and Irvine, have died not before, but after reaching the world's tallest peak? A chilling new discovery at the roof of the world may unlock the truth behind the mystery. By the early 20th century, many of the world's highest peaks have already been summited, but Everest remains out of reach. The tallest mountain on Earth towers at 29,031 feet, or 20 Empire State Buildings. Located along the border of Nepal and Tibet in the Himalayas, a 1,500-mile stretch of rugged mountain range spanning from India to Pakistan. The peak's remoteness only adds to its allure. In 1921, no one has dared a serious attempt, but that's about to change. After the horrors of World War I, Britain is looking for a symbolic achievement to reclaim national pride. Climbing Everest becomes a kind of noble quest, especially for a generation traumatized by trench warfare. Enter British veteran Lieutenant George Mallory. Born in 1886, this son of a clergyman is introduced to climbing by a schoolmaster at Winchester College and quickly becomes obsessed. During World War I, he survives the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, where over 1 million men were killed or wounded. When the fighting stops, Mallory's drive to climb only increases, a way to rise, quite literally, from the chaos of war. Mallory turns his attention to Everest, joining the 1921 reconnaissance expedition to chart a path up the mountain's northern face. In 1922, he returns and takes part in 2 bold summit attempts. On the second trek, an avalanche kills 7 of the team's porters, Sherpa guides indigenous to the region. It's the first ever recorded deaths on Everest, and a tragedy Mallory never forgets. But his dream to summit the mountain remains resolute. In 1924, the 37-year-old Mallory gets another shot at Everest. This time, his team includes 22-year-old Oxford student Andrew "Sandy" Irvine, a star athlete and rowing champion with a mind for machines and a taste for adventure. What Irvine lacked in mountaineering experience, he more than makes up for in engineering genius. He gets the expedition's temperamental oxygen systems to work effectively. That's vital for survival above 26,000 feet, where the air holds just a third of the oxygen found at sea level. At those heights, Everest doesn't just challenge you, it actively tries to kill you, earning this unforgiving elevation its grim nickname, the Death Zone. The team of 8 British climbers, their support staff, and a network of more than 100 local porters establish base camp at the Rongbuk Glacier around 16,500 feet. From there, they ascend the north face of Everest in stages. Camps 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one perched higher, the air thinner, the stakes deadlier. They push upward to Camp 5, just above 25,000 feet, 4,000 feet from the summit. No other climbers have ever reached this spot. Now suffering the effects of extreme altitude, every step feels like a marathon. Then comes Camp 6, a tiny ledge perched at 27,000 feet. This is the last stop before their hardest obstacle. 3 sections known as Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3, a series of sheer rock faces that lead directly to the summit. On June 8, 1924, Mallory and Irvine begin their fateful final climb, less than a half a mile from the peak. They suit up, each carrying oxygen canisters that add 30 pounds of additional weight to their already cumbersome load. They're now each hauling around 80 pounds of gear. Amongst that equipment is a Kodak vest pocket camera. It's crucial for documenting the summit. Now, it's up to Mallory and Irvine to bring back the first photographic view from the top of the world. Mallory also carries a photograph of his wife, Ruth. He's promised to leave it at the summit, a romantic tribute where the earth and heavens meet. And so, they climb. At 12:50 p.m., Noel Odell, stationed near Camp 5, scans the upper ridge. He sees 2 black specks moving together, ascending the second step, a prominent rock feature on the northeast ridge at approximately 28,200 feet, less than 1,000 feet from the summit. But then, the clouds close in and the view vanishes, and with it, so do the climbers. Hours pass with no sign of Mallory or Irvine. The team launches an all-out rescue mission. After 2 days of searching, the rapidly worsening weather forces the expedition to turn back. Mallory and Irvine are declared dead on the mountain. Back in England, the grief is overwhelming. Britain is in mourning for their fallen heroes. Mallory had become a symbol of post-war resilience, of everything the nation hoped to be again. At the Mallory home, the loss cuts deep. Ruth is left to raise their 3 children alone. At Sandy Irvine's house, the family leaves a light on and the door unlocked, just in case he finds his way home. But an Everest-sized question looms like a storm cloud. Before they died, did Mallory and Irvine succeed in their quest and summit Mount Everest? The one thing that could prove it is the remains of the climbers themselves. Not least because those remains should include the Kodak camera the pair was carrying. If they summited, it may contain a photo of them at the peak. This film could settle one of the greatest questions in the history of exploration, but Everest fiercely guards its secrets. For the next decade, no sign of the climbers is found. But then, in 1933, there's a breakthrough. A British expedition stumbles across an ice axe in the snow at 27,700 feet, just below the first step. It's later identified as belonging to Irvine. The discovery offers a glimmer of hope, yet no other trace of the duo is uncovered. And the 1933 expedition also fails to summit, a feat that will remain out of reach for another 2 decades. It isn't until 1953, 29 years after Mallory and Irvine disappeared, that Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa climber from Nepal, and Edmund Hillary, a beekeeper turned mountaineer from New Zealand, become the first to officially stand on the summit of Everest.
35 miles from Kathmandu, capital of Nepal, Hillary and Tenzing were welcomed and congratulated by their fellow members of the expedition. 2 unassuming men had climbed the 29,000-foot monarch of the Himalayas.
It is heralded as one of the greatest human accomplishments of all time. To pull it off, Norgay and Hillary scaled Everest from the mountain's south face in Nepal. Mallory and Irvine had attempted their ascent decades earlier from the much more exposed north face on the Tibetan side. Did Mallory and Irvine reach the top first and do it via an even more challenging route? There's still no proof. We begin here, in the gilded halls of Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg. This is the residence of the Russian Tsars, but since this is June of 1941, it's currently overrun by Nazis. The palace is filled with countless treasures, but the Germans are hunting for the greatest of them all, a masterpiece so valuable it's been called the eighth wonder of the world, but the Soviets have made it disappear, or at least they've tried to.
It's here. I found it. It's here.
Obscured behind wallpaper, the Nazis have discovered their gilded prize. The treasure isn't something hidden in the room. It is the room. A dazzling chamber made of 6 tons of hand-carved amber, gold leaf, and gemstones, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They will now painstakingly dismantle the world-famous amber room, pack it all into crates, and remove it from the palace. But then it will vanish. Some will claim it's destroyed, or perhaps hidden by the Nazis. But 3/4 of a century later, a new search will give hope that this colossal, lost masterpiece might finally be recovered. Its disappearance is mysterious, but its origins are well known. In 1701, the first king of Prussia, Frederick I, sets out to create a room that will dazzle his guests and cement Prussia's place among Europe's great powers. He chooses a highly prized material, amber, fossilized tree resin millions of years old that can be worked into a glittering orange gemstone. At the time, high-quality amber was more valuable than gold. In the hands of Prussia's finest artisans, it is transformed into a masterpiece of craftsmanship and imperial power. In 1716, the room's 129 panels are gifted to Russia's Tsar, Peter the Great, solidifying a diplomatic alliance with Prussia. The panels arrive in St. Petersburg and are ultimately installed in the Catherine Palace. The final result is stunning. Amber carvings gilded in gold, accented with mirrors, and inset with precious gems and beautiful Florentine mosaics. By day, the walls shift in hue from deep honey to fiery gold, and at night, the flicker of 550 candles makes the room glow from within, radiant and alive. Some believe the room is just as beautiful as Versailles' legendary Hall of Mirrors. The goal's much the same, to proclaim prestige and sophistication through a theatrical aura of divine power. But to the Nazis 200 years later, the Amber Room is something else entirely. They arrogantly believe it's their birthright. Prussia would go on to become a part of Germany, and since the Amber Room was created by Prussian craftsmen, the Nazis believe they have a claim to the prized artifact. And now they're stealing it. Within 36 hours of its discovery, the Nazis pack the room's contents into 27 crates and ship them by rail to Germany. The Amber Room is then reconstructed at Königsberg Castle in Nazi-occupied territory. We know it arrives there because the castle's museum lists it in their records as Item 200. It's even put on display for Nazi officials. But by August of 1944, the Nazis are on the defensive. British bombers hammer Königsberg, reducing much of the city, including the castle, to rubble. Then, in April 1945, Soviet troops surround the city. They fight block by block until Germany surrenders. But in the aftermath, no trace of the treasure-filled crates are discovered. Just a month later, a secret Soviet investigation is launched to locate the Amber Room. According to declassified documents from the Russian National Archives, this report concludes that the treasure has most likely been destroyed, consumed by fire during the bombing of Königsberg Castle. So that's the end of the story, right? Not quite. No evidence of its destruction is found. But one man doesn't want to give up easily: Anatoly Kuchumov, a young Russian museum curator desperate to make amends. It was Kuchumov who made the fateful decision to conceal the amber room behind wallpaper in the Catherine Palace, instead of sending it to safety. Now, with colleagues already sent to the Gulag for failing to protect Soviet treasures, Kuchumov is determined to find the remains of the amber panels and save his own skin. Kuchumov's team heads straight to the charred ruins of Königsberg Castle. Sifting through the rubble, they make a startling discovery: the damaged remains of 3 Florentine mosaics that once adorned the amber room's glowing walls. They were added to the room by Empress Elizabeth of Russia in the 1750s to replace oil paintings that originally hung there. These colorful mosaics were made from natural minerals and semi-precious stones, carefully arranged to resemble detailed paintings. The frames are fashioned from carved and sliced pieces of amber of various shades. Though there were originally 4 mosaics, the remnants of only 3 are found among the ruins. But where is the rest of the amber room? During his investigation, Kuchumov also discovers a cache of partially burned German letters. They reveal a Nazi plan to evacuate the amber panels after the Allied bombings in 1944. One, dated January 12, 1945, just before the Soviets captured the city, states the amber room was being packed to be moved far from the front. This finding gives Kuchumov hope. There was no trace of the amber wall panels uncovered in the ashes, only the stone mosaics. And since the mosaics were designed as 4 removable artworks, they were likely packaged separately. If so, there's a chance the amber walls themselves were taken out before the flames engulfed the castle. Anatoly Kuchumov becomes convinced the amber room is still out there, waiting to be found. For the next decade, he leads excavation teams throughout the region. Officially, they're prospecting for oil. Secretly, they spend their days searching ruins, bunkers, and mines. But despite years of excavations across the region, Kuchumov and his team come up with nothing. In 2015, I joined the hunt myself, heading to the former site of Königsberg Castle, where I followed a hot lead: a recently unearthed letter from a Nazi soldier dated 1945. It describes a secret shipment: 4 trucks sent from Königsberg to a remote factory in a small town in Germany called Deutschnedorf. Hello, Peter, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
What's going on up here? It seems like you guys have a full-scale operation going here.
Der erste Hinweis war das Amber Room, Bernsteinzimmer. Es geht auch um Dokumente und um Reichsgold. Egal was wir finden, wir wissen, hier sind Schätze versteckt. Und unter uns, 120 Meter tiefer, ist das Bergwerk.
Right under our feet, there's a huge network of mines, and we think it's in one of these mines underneath the ground.
Beneath the factory is an old silver mine.
Here we go.
Miles of twisting tunnels where the Nazis could have easily stashed the amber room crates.
Look at this. Look at this place. Are you kidding me? This is unbelievable. I mean, this is like Lord of the Rings down here.
Let's go.
Back.
Right.
Something's letting loose down there. Here, come on. Definitely not safe.
Despite an exhaustive search of the old mine, the amber room's prized panels were nowhere to be found. But was this because I, like so many others, had been looking in the wrong place? Now, a stunning new theory suggests that instead of hunting on land, we should have been searching at sea. Welcome to Bluff Creek in Northern California. The date is October 20th, 1967, and it's a picture-perfect day here amidst the towering redwoods. Which brings us to these 2 cowboys, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. And just over there, movement. Not a deer, not a bird, something much bigger. Patterson rolls on his 16mm camera and films 59 seconds of shaky, grainy footage that will make Bigfoot a household name. So, is it irrefutable proof of a Sasquatch, or the most convincing hoax ever staged? Nearly 60 years later, cutting-edge AI may finally bring this mystery into focus. According to Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, after they film the creature, it vanishes into the trees, leaving behind a trail of massive footprints, each pressed deep into the soft creek-bed soil. They say they race back to town to develop the film, and when the images finally flicker to life, what they've captured is beyond belief. Roll it. For a few fleeting moments, a large, hairy biped strides away from the camera, glancing back as if it knows it's being watched. Its gait is unusual, arms swinging wide. Sightings of a large mystery primate in the woods are nothing new. This is just the latest chapter in a story told for centuries. Indigenous people have shared tales of towering, hairy creatures, Sasquatch, haunting the forests. Later, European settlers in America also told tales of encounters with mysterious giants lurking in the wild. Then, in 1958, came the first major modern evidence. A road crew uncovered massive, human-like footprints in the mud near Bluff Creek. One worker, bulldozer operator Jerry Crew, made a plaster cast of one of the prints and took it to the local newspaper. The story grabbed national headlines, and with it, the name Bigfoot was born. Which brings us back to 1967, when Bluff Creek returns to the spotlight. Patterson and Gimlin say they capture their now iconic footage right near where the huge footprints were found 10 years earlier in the middle of Northern California's Six Rivers National Forest. Bigfoot explodes into the public's imagination. Pop culture embraces the creature with merchandise, exhibits, and starring roles in monster movies. And all across the country, people are hooked. True believers pack up cameras and courage and head for the woods, hoping to capture their own proof. But anthropologists and biologists at the time dismissed the film as a hoax. Many claim Bigfoot is just a man in a gorilla suit, filmed at a distance with intentionally shaky camera work. In particular, skeptics doubt the credibility of Roger Patterson, a rodeo cowboy and Bigfoot enthusiast who, coincidentally, published a book on the subject just a year before filming his famous encounter. They suggest Patterson staged the footage to make money and drum up publicity for his book. But while fame certainly finds Roger Patterson, fortune never does. 5 years later, in 1972, he dies of cancer, broke, but still defiantly clinging to his Bigfoot story to his last breath. For over 50 years, footage that some contend is the definitive proof of Bigfoot has been analyzed, debated, debunked, and rebunked. Not a real word, but you get the idea. Now, scientists armed with cutting-edge technology are re-examining the film once more. Leading the way is Dr. Jeff Meldrum, professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University.
Now, in the age of artificial intelligence, the prospect is very real that someone could take the Patterson-Gimlin film and instruct AI to, quote, clean it up, to create the clearest version and make a definitive statement of the credibility of the Patterson-Gimlin film.
But there is one major challenge to a definitive re-examination of the footage. The original film reel is said to be missing. Sometime in the mid-1990s, it apparently disappears from a film vault.
The fact of the matter is, the original film is no longer available. And so we are left with the numerous copies that have been made over the years. In many instances, copies of copies of copies. And of course, with each copying process, the resulting images are rather degraded and have lost a lot of clarity that was present in the original. And that has historically produced some very misleading conclusions and inferences drawn from the film.
Dr. Meldrum set out to rebuild the Patterson-Gimlin film frame by frame, correcting errors from decades of copying. And to do so, he returned to Bill Munns, the special effects expert who had previously analyzed the film and accumulated dozens of copies of it during the process.
In undertaking this project, Bill very carefully and precisely created high-resolution photographic images of individual film frames, creating an archive that we've been able to use in this project.
Armed with the highest resolution images of each film frame, Meldrum worked with artificial intelligence specialist Isaac Tian to enhance the film as never before.
With his talents, Isaac was able to stabilize these images, removed much of the motion jitter, and optimize the information that was in the existing copies of the film without adding any extraneous information. This remarkably stable and clear depiction allowed us to render a version that is as good, certainly, if not better, than the original film strip.
The results? The clearest version of the Patterson-Gimlin film ever seen. Take a look for yourself. To some experts, this stabilized footage has the effect of demystifying the Patterson-Gimlin film, revealing a very human-looking figure crossing the creek. In other words, a man in a suit. But the trained eyes of Jeff Meldrum see something very different.
We can observe not only muscle groups, but we can see the contraction in the movements of the joints, whether it's the quadriceps and the thigh, it's the tightening of the hamstrings and the action of the tendon across the knee joint. You can see the breast tissue sitting upon the underlying muscle of the pectoralis major. These are not features that are easily, if at all, possible to incorporate into a costume. This is a real flesh and bones organism that is making its way across the sandbar. In my mind, there is just no way that this could be a hoax.
Dr. Meldrum may be convinced the Patterson-Gimlin film is proof of Bigfoot, but many of his peers remain extremely skeptical. They point out that in more than half a century since the footage was filmed, no physical remains, scat, or DNA of a Bigfoot-like creature has ever been scientifically validated. And let's begin on November 28, 1953, in Midtown Manhattan. It's just after 4 a.m., an unusually quiet time for the city that never sleeps. No commuters streaming in yet from nearby Penn Station, but that doesn't mean I'm alone out here. In fact, I'm standing by a grisly scene. CIA employee Frank Olson has fallen from a window at the Hotel Statler and plummeted 10 floors to his death. The authorities declare there are no signs of foul play, calling it suicide. But decades later, declassified documents will cast doubt on the official story. So, if Frank Olson didn't take his own life, what really happened here? New evidence suggests the truth is far more sinister than anyone ever imagined. Our story begins 10 years earlier in 1943. U.S. Army Captain Frank Olson has just been transferred to Maryland's Camp Detrick to begin work on a new, highly secretive biological weapons program. At just 33 years old, Olson is one of the first scientists inducted into the program. With a PhD in biochemistry, Olson's job is to test various biological substances like anthrax for use as weapons against the Nazis. Over the next few years, Olson works on other unsettling secret experiments, like Operation Harness in Antigua, which tests the airborne spread of potential bioweapons by exposing hundreds of sheep, guinea pigs, and monkeys to potent toxins. In 1950, he participates in Operation Sea Spray, which clandestinely releases a non-lethal bacteria into the mists of San Francisco, tracking how quickly an airborne disease could attack a populated area. And though he finds his work disturbing, he continues to move up the ranks. By 1953, Olson has accepted an official promotion to a new top-secret program at the CIA. He now finds himself at the heart of a deeply clandestine operation, something codenamed MK Ultra. Led by Chief CIA scientist Sidney Gottlieb, MK Ultra is working to develop a substance that can do three extraordinary things: force alleged spies to tell the truth, wipe the memory of prisoners, and, wildest of all, induce a subject to perform assassinations against their will. In short, the CIA wants to develop mind control. Olson is a principal investigator for many of the MK Ultra experiments, forced to witness poisonings and drug-induced interrogations using the chemical weapons he helped create. By the fall of 1953, despite a reputation as a jovial, sociable family man, Olson falls into a deep depression. On November 18, 1953, his boss, Sidney Gottlieb, organizes a retreat at a cabin at Deep Creek Lake for those on the MK Ultra project, purportedly as a morale booster. Olson and 11 others travel to the lake for rest and relaxation. It'll be anything but. The first night comes and goes with little fanfare. Then, after dinner on the second night, November 19th, Gottlieb passes around glasses of Cointreau liqueur to the men. "20 minutes later, things start to go off the rails. Despite only having a single drink, Olson becomes highly agitated. Witnesses describe him as paranoid, convinced someone has played a trick on him. What are you doing to me? He shouts delusional insults at the other men. The next night, when Olson arrives back home, he's a changed man. He's sullen and confused, refusing to play with his kids. Later that night, Olson makes a single ominous statement to Alice.
I made a terrible mistake.
But he won't say anything more. Over the next 4 days, a deeply troubled Olson travels back and forth to New York City with two of his colleagues to visit what Olson believes is a CIA-approved psychiatrist. While there, they take him to see a musical and a magic show in an attempt to lift his spirits. But despite this, Olson continues to show signs of declining mental health.
Get away from me!
Finally, on November 27th, 9 days after he first began behaving erratically, and with his depressed and agitated symptoms continuing, Olson agrees to enter a sanitarium named Chestnut Lodge. But before heading to the facility, he and his CIA colleague Robert Lashbrook spend one final night in New York, staying at the Hotel Statler on the 10th floor. According to Lashbrook's account, in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., he wakes up just in time to see Olson sprinting across the room and diving full force through the window. It's a grisly scene on the street below. Olson's mangled body is strewn across the sidewalk, dead. Authorities quickly rule his death a suicide. But there are whispers of foul play. Frank's wife is adamant that he would never kill himself. The night manager of the hotel also tells authorities that, quote, "In all my years in the hotel business, I never encountered a case where someone got up in the middle of the night, ran across a dark room in his underwear, avoiding 2 beds, and dove through a closed window with the shade and curtains drawn." Despite any lingering doubts, the official story of suicide holds for over 20 years, until the mid-1970s. That's when the U.S. government declassifies a bombshell report exposing decades of illegal CIA activity. And buried deep within its pages is the first crack in the agency's long-standing cover story. For over 2 decades, the CIA insists biological warfare expert Frank Olson took his own life. But then, in 1975, a newly declassified document cracks the case wide open, hinting not at suicide, but something far more sinister. It's a single paragraph that reads in part, quote, "On one occasion, LSD was administered to an employee of the Department of the Army without his knowledge. He then developed serious side effects and was sent to New York with a CIA escort for psychiatric treatment. Several days later, he jumped from a 10th floor window of his room and died as a result." It's a stunning revelation. Michael Evans, editorial director at the National Security Archive, has spent decades uncovering buried government secrets and has dug into what really happened to Frank Olson.
Olson was among an elite group of chemists and scientists who were trying to develop methods to interrogate suspected enemy spies or defectors that they thought might be able to be turned. This is a time when 1949 and after, when LSD was really kind of all the rage among the people who were in charge of the CIA at the time, and including Sidney Gottlieb, who was the chief chemist at the CIA, were really sort of enthralled with the possibilities of what LSD could do in terms of finding a truth serum or a way to control human minds. The paragraph about the Olson case reveals that Sidney Gottlieb spiked the Cointreau at the retreat with LSD and did it without telling anyone. Just a few days after Frank Olson's death, there's a memo in the CIA to impound all of the LSD that it had on site or in various places around the world. So this is clear indication that they knew immediately that there was some connection between Frank's death and the LSD experiments that they were doing.
Anyone who knew during all of those years never told Alice Olson the real story of her husband's death. She would discover it by accident more than 2 decades later. In essence, it was a 22-year-long cover-up.
My anger was unbelievable at how I had been duped for this length of time, and the anguish which was unnecessary.
The CIA's secret drugging of Frank Olson enraged his family. His wife Alice, along with their son Eric, sued the agency for wrongful death. They settled for $750,000 and an apology, but notably did not receive an admission of guilt. Eric was far from satisfied. He wanted the full story of what happened to his dad, so he set out to uncover the truth himself.
He decides that the time has come to exhume his father's remains and to see what they might learn. They discovered that Frank Olson had a traumatic head wound to the front of his face when he supposedly had landed on his back when he hit the ground. So this raised a lot of questions about whether he had been struck by someone before potentially being thrown out the window.
The official story was that Olson went face first through a closed window, but a new autopsy revealed no cuts from glass, and it was concluded that the wound on his forehead did not come from the fall. To Eric, this was clear proof that his father was murdered. It's a shocking accusation, but it also begs the question, why? Could it be because the CIA was worried Olson would reveal the dirty secrets of MK Ultra?
Frank Olson was among just a couple of dozen people who would have known almost all the details about the MK Project and about all of these sinister programs that the CIA and the Army had been developing and using on people. Any revelations that he might have made in a mental state that was deteriorating would have been something that the CIA would have been very concerned about.
It seems Eric was onto something, because in 2024, further top-secret CIA documents were declassified, showing there was indeed much more to Frank Olson's ending than was previously known.
In one especially damning document, we learned that the psychiatrist that Frank Olson was taken to see in New York City was not a psychiatrist at all, but rather an allergist. Taken together, the collection suggests strongly that the CIA was never interested in Frank Olson's mental health, but rather the security of the MK Ultra program.
The documents and second autopsy don't conclusively prove Frank Olson's murder, but they do lay bare a disturbing truth. He was unknowingly dosed with hallucinogens by his own employer, the US government. If there is one positive thing to come out of this nightmare, the declassified files suggest Olson's death helped bring an end to this disturbing secret program, as far as we know. The full, unredacted truth may remain forever in the shadows. Inside that house, the young boy who lives there is anything but at peace. He's growling in a strange, almost demonic voice, and lashing out uncontrollably. Soon, the Catholic Church will get involved, leading to a terrifying exorcism. The events will inspire a best-selling novel, which in turn becomes the iconic horror film, The Exorcist. The real child behind it all will become known to the public only by the alias Roland Doe. But who is he really? What becomes of him? And most importantly, is he actually possessed by the devil? In 1971, William Blatty's terrifying novel, The Exorcist, hits bookshelves. Inspired by rumors of a real-life possession of a young child, it sells millions of copies and becomes a cultural phenomenon. 2 years later, the story leaps onto the big screen and becomes a massive hit. Audiences scream, critics rave. It is widely considered one of the greatest horror films of all time. But none of this would have been possible without the real boy, known by the nickname Roland Doe. In 1949, he's 13 years old, an only child who lives with his parents in the Maryland suburbs. Roland loves spending time with his Aunt Tilly, playing with her spirit board. She's a spiritualist, someone who believes the dead can communicate with the living. It's seen as a bit of harmless fun. They spend evenings together asking questions in the dark. So far, pretty straightforward. But from here on out, the story will take terrifying twists and turns, the details of which are gathered from those involved. Is it all true? Is it not? Well, buckle up, because things are about to get supernatural. According to his mother and father, it starts small. A phantom dripping sound, scratching beneath the floorboards, and a picture of Christ shaking and falling to the ground. The noises continue for 10 straight nights, and then they suddenly stop. 3 days later, a new sound begins. The phantom creak of shoes, pacing softly around Roland's bed. Then, in late January, tragedy strikes. Aunt Tilly dies. After that, the strange activity only seems to grow worse. and Roland's mother begins to wonder if her sister's spirit has joined the voices from the beyond.
Aunt Tilly, if that's you, knock 3 times.
Or perhaps it's something worse.
Aunt Tilly, stop!
According to the family, Roland's behavior also becomes disturbing. He speaks in a strange guttural voice, murmuring Latin phrases he does not know. Objects near him move without being touched. He lashes out at his family with a frightening fury. Then says he doesn't remember a thing. Roland's family is deeply religious, and so, desperate for help, his mother turns to Father Edward Hughes, a local Jesuit priest. Over the course of 2 weeks of meetings with the boy, Hughes grows alarmed as Roland's condition worsens. With no clear answers, in February of 1949, Hughes arranges for him to be admitted to Georgetown University Hospital for observation. But doctors find no medical explanation for his outbursts. So, Father Hughes decides to act, performing an unsanctioned exorcism on Roland. According to Father Hughes, he begins his ritual by sprinkling holy water and praying for Roland. But midway through, the agitated boy suddenly breaks free and strikes Father Hughes, slashing his arm. The exorcism is abandoned. With both doctors and the priest apparently unable to help, Roland is sent home. Let's be clear, everything we've just told you is what happened according to Roland's family.
Let me see.
Weeks later, it is said the manifestations take a disturbing new turn. Roland apparently wakes with scratches on his skin. At first, they're just lines, but then an enigmatic word appears. Louis. To the family, the message is unmistakable. They have relatives in the city of St. Louis. They need to go there now. They leave Maryland and make the trip west, staying with family in the quiet suburb of Belnor. But the frightening disturbances continue, and soon word reaches local St. Louis priest Father Bowdern. At 52, Bowdern is a scholar and seasoned Jesuit priest who served as a military chaplain in World War II. But what he hears from the family is serious enough that he takes it straight to the Archbishop of St. Louis, who agrees the child must undergo a second exorcism immediately. It will become one of the most well-documented exorcisms in U.S. history, and it is one of the rare times the Church formally sanctions the rite on American soil. Father Bowdern prepares to lead the deliverance, joined by his assistant, Father Bishop, who documents the ordeal in a handwritten journal. To guide the exorcism, Bowdern turns to the Church's ancient manual, the Rituale Romanum, a book of rites written in Latin, unchanged for centuries. He memorizes the prayers and gathers what is required: a crucifix, holy water, and the relic of a saint. Because once the ritual begins, there's no turning back.
Much of the event takes place here in a secluded psychiatric wing. Astoundingly, the exorcism goes on for over a month as Bowdern battles what he believes is the devil himself.
Mother of God, pray for us.
The session grows ever more violent, more profane. Bowdern and his assistant recount the litany of the saints.
Pray for us. Saint Michael, pray for us.
As they invoke the saints, it's recorded that the bed begins to shake.
The power of Christ compels you.
Roland lashes out, breaking the priest's nose. But the men continue their prayers. The boy grows suddenly calm, almost himself again. Seizing the moment, Bowdern acts.
Will you accept this baptism?
Almighty and ever-loving God.
To their surprise, Roland agrees. He renounces Satan.
The power of Satan. Save the people.
According to the priest's diary, what happens next is unforgettable. Roland cries out, declaring himself to be the archangel Saint Michael, wielding a fiery sword.
I command you, Satan, to leave this body now! No!
And after a hellish month of ritual, violence, and perceived possession, just like that, it's over. Roland seems at last to be at peace. Whatever dark presence had haunted him now appears to be gone. After the ordeal, Roland returns home to Maryland. He and his parents never speak publicly of what happened. The only record of all of this is the remarkable diary kept by Father Bishop. For the next 70 years, two huge questions will remain unanswered. Who was the real boy behind this incredible story? And was he truly possessed by the devil? Now, we may finally have the answers.
Roland was a teenager. He was in an emotional place. He was grieving his aunt. And in the middle of his grief, strange things started happening. While it's impossible to know whether or not something supernatural took place, when you step back and look at it, the events don't necessarily point to the supernatural. They point to stress, trauma, and isolation. There are psychological conditions that could explain what the family and priests believe they saw.
Much of what we know about Roland's case comes from the religious perspective of Father Bishop's diary. Skeptics argue that those strange events, the banging sounds in the house, and the scratches on Roland's skin could have been produced by a boy in the throes of despair. But how does that explain the fact that he was speaking Latin, a language he didn't know? Some believe it was a case of impressive mimicry, echoing terms he'd previously heard in the church and during the exorcisms themselves.
The power of suggestion could deeply take play in this case. The family was deeply religious. The priests were around him at all times. People speaking about God or the devil and things of this nature around him and the family.
For Roland's religious family, the devil is seen as a real and terrifying force. And once strange things started happening, they prioritized seeking help from the church over the medical community. Being exposed to that kind of influence at a young age, while also processing the loss of his beloved Aunt Tilly, could have conditioned Roland's mind to believe he was possessed.
If your family believes it, if your pastor believes it, if the church believes it, then you might end up believing it too.
Reverend Holmes is convinced that Roland's ordeal may have been less about demons and more about the fragile boundaries of the human mind. In 1999, the Vatican revisited its understanding of possession. Priests must first rule out mental illness. But in the case of Roland, another huge mystery still remains. Who was he, and what became of him after his harrowing experience?
In 2021, more than 50 years after the ordeal, the man once known as Roland Doe dies at the age of 86. And at that point, journalists around the world reveal his name, Ronald Edwin Hunkler.